When you're looking at adding a subwoofer to a Polaris RZR, the first thing that pops into most people's heads is the fear of spending a lot of money only to end up with a speaker that either won't survive the trail or just sounds like a tinny whine when you're cruising the backcountry. I've been there, scrolling through endless forums, trying to separate the hype from the honest feedback, and wondering if the extra weight and wiring hassle are worth the extra bass on a vehicle that already shakes the ground. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, and in the next few minutes I'll walk through why that decision matters, what the SSV Works Underdash subwoofer actually brings to the table, and who will get the most mileage out of it. First off, let's talk about the kind of situation that makes a subwoofer feel like a necessary upgrade. I've ridden my own 2022 RZR Pro on everything from quiet lakeside trails to Foolin sand dunes where the engine is already screaming. In those moments, the low-frequency rumble you hear from the stock system is barely perceptible over the wind and the engine roar. For a crew that spends most of the weekend out on the trail, that missing bass can be the difference between a soundtrack that feels immersive and one that just feels like background noise. The SSV Works kit is built to sit under the dash, so it doesn't interfere with the driver's line of sight, and it's marketed as a plug-and-play solution. That promise is what drew my attention because the alternative usually means a full-blown wiring harness, custom brackets, and a lot of time in the garage. The plug-and-play claim isn't just marketing fluff. The kit comes with a pre-wired harness that matches the stock power and ground points on the 2020-2024 RZR models. In practice, that means you can disconnect the dash, plug the harness into the existing connector, and bolt the sub into the space that the factory left for a potential audio upgrade. I've watched a few owners install it on a RZR Turbo, and the whole process took roughly 3,045 minutes with basic hand tools. There's no need to splice wires or program a separate amplifier, which is a huge win for anyone who isn't comfortable with automotive electrical work. That ease of installation translates directly into saved time and a lower chance of making a wiring mistake that could fry the entire system. Now, let's get into the actual listening experience. The subwoofer is a 10-inch unit housed in a ported enclosure, which is essentially a tuned box that lets the driver move more air without needing a massive speaker cone. In real-world use, you'll notice that the low end feels fuller when you crank the volume up on your ride command. On a quiet trail, the bass is subtle but present, giving you that feeling of power that you usually only get from a larger vehicle. When you're hitting the dunes, the sub adds a throbbing pulse that you can actually feel through the seat, not just hear. It's not going to turn your RZR into a concert hall, but it does fill the frequency gap that the stock tweeters leave wide open. One of the strengths that really matters on the trail is durability. The kit's construction is described as rugged, with a sealed enclosure that resists dust, mud, and water splashes, common hazards when you're crossing a creek or riding through a wash. In the field, owners have reported that the sub stays solidly in place even after a few hard jumps, and the ported design means there's less internal vibration that could eventually loosen the mounting bolts. Because the sub is integrated under the dash, it's also protected from direct impact, unlike aftermarket speakers you might mount on the exterior. That said, there are a couple of practical trade-offs you should keep in mind before you click Add to Cart. First, the kit draws a fair amount of power from the vehicle's electrical system. If you're already running a lot of accessories, lights, winches, high-capacity winches, or a secondary winch controller, the added load could tax your battery, especially on a cold morning. It's not something that will instantly drain a fresh battery, but it's a factor for people who run a heavily accessorized rig and rely on a single battery for everything. Second, while the ported enclosure does a great job of amplifying bass, it also means the sub is tuned to a specific frequency range. If you're hoping for deep, cinematic-grade subbass, you'll notice the limits. The sound is more about adding a tactile feel rather than creating a full-range low-frequency performance. So, who should consider this upgrade? If you spend the majority of your time on the trail, especially on rides where the engine noise is already high and you want that extra bass punch to make music or navigation cues more immersive, you'll likely appreciate the sub. It's also a good fit for owners who value a clean installation without having to get into the guts of the vehicle's wiring.